everybody. Welcome to the people who are watching. We are coming from Amsterdam, and this has been an in-person work week where pretty much the whole company has gotten together. And we wanted to take the opportunity to have an in-person AMA. So we have Emanuele here. And this is going to be a relatively brief AMA. I know that some people have sent in very detailed questions, but this one is more just to sort of give a bit of an overview of what's been going on and what has been the outcome, I would say, of the work week. We've been here since Monday. So I think quite a lot of good discussions have happened and quite a lot of, I would say it seems like decisions have been made. So we are here to discuss what's been going on. This is obviously Emanuele Francioni, who is the co-founder and CEO, and we look like newsreaders. So yeah, do you have anything you want to intro with, or should I get going with the questions?
Hi.
Okay. So one question to begin, why do we do these? What's the point of having a work week, and what happens during a work week that couldn't or would be harder to happen remotely?
Well, a work week is essentially a time in which the entirety of the team gets together. Since, I believe, 2020, we took the decision of having a fully remote company. And this has been a tremendous opportunity for the entirety of the organization, because we were way more efficient. We didn't really have commuting anymore. We were partially remote at the very beginning, but we didn't, and because of that, we didn't really develop many processes, for instance, to manage the development process, to manage the marketing activities, to manage the business development activities. Because when you're partially remote, you actually do not need to have a remote process. But since we, in 2020, we went completely remote, then there was the need to develop a full-fledged remote and to reinvent a little bit the organization to go fully remote. And we learned a lot. We became a lot more efficient. I think we became a lot more effective, both in our development activities and the other activities. However, the things that you lose when you are a fully remote company, for instance, is also the capability of getting together in person and working on very focused for hours at end on a certain particular problem. And this is also why we had many different work weeks, sometimes with 2, 3, 4 developers, sometimes more business development related. But when there is something very hard to crack, then we really want to get together. And in this particular work week is actually very important for us because it is the work week before our mainnet. And we wanted to create a very specific and very concrete checkpoint in time in which everybody would get together. We would sort out anything that could have been problematic. We could have gotten a commitment and some discussion, for instance, about the things that still need to be implemented, and to coordinate all the activities. Needless to say, it's also a lot of fun and a lot of enjoyment to be around all the Duskketeers, so to speak.
This is true. Can confirm. Are these Discord questions coming in? Okay. So how would you say it's been going from your perspective? And is there anything you can share that has been an outcome of the work week?
I think it has been going very, very well. There are a couple of things that, in fact, we have been focusing on, apart from establishing probably a little more detailed roadmap from here to the upcoming months, and creating quite some precise checkpoints that we are going to check, also their checkpoints later on, to understand if we are still on track. But the thing that I learned is the fact that indeed we are very confident about the timelines that we have been presenting. And we are doing everything possible to meet all these different timelines. There is no new information that would make me suspicious of these timelines, and this is already great news. I would say that there were many different highlights. from an organizational perspective, all the founders they got together, and management got together in order to evaluate the organization at large and to create some specific goals moving forward. Related to budget, for instance, we very recently released our report. So we are in quite good financial health, but we wanted to make sure that this can continue also for the years in advance. From a technical perspective, we have been focusing and fleshing out also the economic protocol, which is probably the last bit that needed some specification. And we are chiseling away at a lot of different other components that we really need to get right. Probably the most important one being the web wallet, but there are many others. And we also had different kind of strategic meeting with prospects.
One thing that has been really nice for me about talking to everybody and seeing everybody is how motivated people are, not just to do their job, not just to get paid, but to have a real impact on the way that finance is done and to make it better. So I wondered if you could elaborate a bit on my opinion there.
Well, it is very important that the entirety of the organization moving forward always keeps an eye on our mission and always keeps an eye on our vision. You can say what you want about the crypto market, you can say what you want about DLTs, but there is one single feature that to me is the killer of them all. And it is the capability of creating an interoperable infrastructure on top of which certain particular actors, certain particular organizations can offload their technical systems for no cost in order to improve the efficiency and in order to, in fact, evolve the operations. Our specific realm, the one that we indeed will develop with our partners and our business and through our business arm, is indeed the security realm, is the real world asset realm. And that is probably the most important thing that I wanted everybody to get focused on. Dusk is going to become the interoperable network or the interoperable infrastructure on top of which licensed institutions like MTFs, like security exchanges, will offload their systems so that they can get rid, remove, or at least work alongside brokers. What are these brokers? CSD, Central Security Depository, that are a great impediment for the development of these secondary markets and for their efficiency. Clearing houses that takes multiple days in order to validate and verify transactions, something that our DLT can do in seconds or milliseconds even. Settlement platform. So as soon as we have this interoperable network, this interoperable common platform, we are going to standardize this product. We are going to slash the cost of any MTF so that they don't have to do primary market anymore. They don't have to do issuance anymore. The assets are going to be issued directly by the issuers. That can be crowdfunding platforms, for instance. They can be funds that have got a portfolio and they can tokenize their own assets. They can be even businesses that will want to experiment with the blockchain and issue assets themselves in the form of a bond. This will be available to all the security exchanges because they will be all connected to a common interoperable platform. And then the MTFs, so the security exchanges, they can make money through the secondary market rather than doing primary issuance, which is very costly for them. But right now they cannot because if they would do only secondary market, they would not survive. because the costs of all these brokers would essentially bring them down. Whereas Binance, for instance, does only secondary market, and it makes, I don't know how many millions per day, in fact, only on secondary, which is what creating, obviously, a lot of different liquidity possibilities and opportunities in the world of crypto. I want the same thing done for the regulated world, and I want our users to basically enjoy the same opportunity, but with regulated products, that not only with crypto and other digital native products.
And what would be some of the benefits of that? Because whenever I hear you speak or anybody else speak, it's not just we want to make institutions more money, or we want this to be easier for people, for institutions. It's about financial inclusion. I think you said that financial freedom requires financial inclusion. So assuming that most people watching this are kind of like normal people, how would, Binance for securities have an impact on their lives?
All right, this is quite a very extensive question. I will try to be brief for once. So Euroclear, for instance, a CSD, one of these brokers, do you know how many transactions they clear per year?
No idea.
They are probably in the hundreds of trillions. Euroclear as a company is worth itself probably several hundreds of billions.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine, and in order to create this enormous value for this company, essentially they needed to get this money from somewhere. Where they got it from? Well, they got it from transactions, because they are in fact intermediating transactions in the security space. Now imagine that there are no more these hundreds of billions that essentially a broker gets. What have you? You have that these 100 billions, in fact, remain with all the different kind of exchanges. This creates more efficiency. This creates a much, much lower barrier, for instance, for a company, for an organization to finance itself. Right now, creating a finance or the capability of financing certain operation for a company is actually quite expensive. If we can make that efficient, if we can make that free almost, it's probably never going to be free, but as good as free compared to the incredible expensive costs right now, it means that we create a lot more circulation of capital. We create better consolidated liquidity. This will not only benefit the entire economic tissue, but will benefit also users, because users will have direct access to these assets. They can invest way more easily without really jumping hoops through multiple different kind of brokers. They are not going to be, this is not going to be very expensive for businesses that want to issue their assets. And most importantly, the users will be able to invest because they will not get stuck with an illiquid asset for years. They will be able to go on a secondary market if they need to and liquidate their assets and sell them if they have to. One of the biggest hurdles, for instance, for investment and for financial freedom, because investment is what gives you financial freedom. You don't get financially free by renting your time. You get financially free by owning something, by owning a financial product, and by accruing yield. And one of the biggest hurdles is the capability of liquidating your asset, is the capability of exiting your asset, which for illiquid bonds, illiquid equity, illiquid stake, that doesn't happen. So by creating this capability, by creating much higher liquidity, by eroding the barriers to entry, we are essentially, I believe, we are moving toward better, more efficient finance, hence more possibilities and opportunities for financial freedom.
Cool. Thank you. Another thing that I see listening to, I like listening to the developers talking. They're so smart. But I think a lot of, I feel like our developers get to solve really interesting problems. They're not just getting to scale a blockchain. They're not just getting to use zero knowledge proofs to make a layer 2 faster. They're getting to solve probably some of the most important questions, at least in economics. And in that sense, do you think it's even fair to judge Dusk as if it was a blockchain? Or it's something different entirely? It's almost, rather than solving blockchain issues, these guys are having to use blockchain to solve financial and economic issues. So
that is a very fair, that problem is a very fair point. So what I told you before, our ambition is to create an interoperable system that is a protocol and therefore is inexpensive to use by users, by institutions, and by organizations that want to create their own or they want to issue their own products. That's what we want to do. For us, using blockchain is indeed the implementation detail, is indeed the technology that we found to be more suitable for something like this to happen. Why a blockchain? Why essentially smart contract platform? Well, because the smart contract platform is run, first of all, in a decentralized fashion, and therefore the community indeed can run part of the infrastructure and stay incentivized through the mechanism of the Coinbase, for instance, by getting a reward from the network. They contribute to the security of the network. It is quite like having a state-owned AWS, for instance, or a state-owned Azure, or whatever kind of cloud you want, that you don't have to pay because it is owned by a community, So that was indeed the reason why we turned to blockchain, because it creates for some use cases, probably not for all of them, but for some use cases, it creates really the opportunity of being able to run certain operation automatically and inexpensively. Of course, blockchain alone doesn't really help you. You need to have a lot more added to it. You need to have a virtual machine that is capable of running smart contracts, which are programs that run automatically and can be programmed, because you have multiple different kind of process and operation, and you want to fulfill all of them. You need privacy, because it is unacceptable for any kind of organization to have their own balance, transaction, what have you, in plain daylight. We needed to do a lot, or to create a lot of different protocols to, essentially just create a standard implementation for the regulations that are existing. So to make sure that you do not need to call, again, a broker or a trusted third party to check if regulation is met. This regulation can be automated. And of course, regulators and those that are ultimately responsible for the policy, they have a place in this system too. So indeed, the way, to answer your question, the way that we envisioned back then and that we are still supporting at this point in time to create this interoperable framework and infrastructure, is definitely starts with a distributed ledger technology, permissionless distributed ledger technology, which is a blockchain.
Cool. There were quite a lot of questions that people asked. I'm not sure actually if it was the same person, but there was a lot of questions that I saw about the masses. It was about onboarding the masses. There were questions about marketing to the masses. The masses.
The masses.
Yes.
Masses of people.
Yes, everybody. And what I wanted to ask was, how does one go about reaching the masses? Obviously, we're not going to go door to door. Have you heard of blockchain? But once institutions are onboarded, does that start to sort of allow the masses to do it? Or it's that users have to start? Like, when people talk about the masses, are we talking about institutions? And it's just that we don't want to say that because it's not very sexy. Or is it that we would need to go out and convert individuals as well?
Right. Okay, so Dusk is not catering to the masses. Obviously, we have a very focused group that we want to go after. If this focus group adopts us, even in a very, very tiny percentile, then our protocol is going to be wildly successful in terms of transaction. Like I told you, Euroclear clears trillions, hundreds of trillions of transactions. And if we just go to MTFs and we basically say, hey, some of the transactions that, on some of the issuance that you're doing on a CSD for a certain amount of money, then you can definitely do also on our protocol for zero costs. And then they will start to use it. This means that they will issue on Dusk. We will see an inflow of transaction. Now, when you are issuing an asset, okay, I'm not talking about the masses here. I'm talking about one asset. Let's say that it is a bond that pays a coupon every month, right? So you have the issuance transaction. Then when basically the coupon needs to be paid, then you have a transaction for every single user or every single entity that bought that bond. And then you need to have probably also a share registry there. These are different kind of transactions. These are transactions that, in fact, just go over and over and over again. And then there is another issuance that happens, and then there is another, and every issuance adds a multiple of these transactions. What did I do so far? Nothing. The masses are absolutely nowhere in these pictures, and I am scaling up the amount of transaction only for doing CSD. I didn't say anything about clearing operations. I didn't say anything about transaction settlement. I didn't say anything about KYC. I didn't say anything about digital identity. I didn't say anything about all these things. I am just speaking about issuance, let alone having an exchange that every hour, for instance, reconciles its own off-chain order book with the on-chain one. That too is an immense amount of different transactions. Did I onboard anyone from the masses? No. So that is obviously step one. As soon as there is, as there are assets, and these assets indeed they do ameliorate the situation of key strategic institutions in the economic tissue, and at that point in time, we will go out and say to everybody, retail or not, an organization or not, about the fact that on Dusk they can find these kind of assets that they can invest, and that is going to be the commencement of our full plan. That is going to be the masses, but as always, I believe in focus. Mm-hmm. So as soon as we will have a very high utility, then we will have some luxury problem to be solved, like scalability, for instance, and these kind of things. So before marketing, before spending money and budget for marketing to the masses in order to convince your crypto clown 69 to get and buy a bond on a very legit organization, I don't know, FAMOF, which is a very popular bicycle organization here, then there are some steps that we will need to do. This doesn't mean that we are not going to spend effort to make sure that everybody and their mother knows how successful we are, but certainly we have a very clear focus and we are not deviating from it.
So first you get the institutions and then you get the masses.
Yes, first we will have a shitload of transaction on Dusk Network done by a few institutions that will care and will gain a lot of money by doing so. And then we will make sure that the masses will get their cut by having the capability of onboarding. Of course, those that are the enlightened one, so the early birds, already know about what I am saying because they are listening already, and they will be probably the first one to re-up the benefit before we are going to open the floodgate and market Dusk to the moon and back.
Excellent. There was one other question that I had written down that I wanted to ask you. So, and you've kind of touched on it, but the way that for almost everything that exists in the current financial system, there's a Dusk version, but decentralized, is how it's kind of seeming to me. You've spoken a bit about this part of the infrastructure can do this thing that exists currently, and this part does that. I was wondering if you could put some of those things together, like how. I've not asked this question very well because I've been quite vague.
Yes, indeed.
But where you've talked about like CSDs would be replaced by this and the clearance part would be done over here, I wonder if you could put that together a little bit.
Yes. So this goes a little bit on what kind of utility does a blockchain have, right? The DLT has. There are many different brokers that are used by different kind of financial institutions, different kind of organizations, and these brokers they perform a service, and this service is always about reconciling something that happens in an exchange with something that happens on another exchange or another affiliated institution, like a bank, like a crowdfunding platform, like a fund, like an ETF provider, for instance. And these kind of brokers, they perform normally a single operation, and this single operation is one that the DLT provides for free and very efficiently. I'll give you a very simple example. Issuance for a DLT is nothing else than creating a token. Creating a token, it means issuing something. Creating a token is done by a CSD, right? Clearing is nothing else than executing or verifying, validating a transaction, which any blockchain does. Even Bitcoin does validate transactions. Then there is the settlement, but this is what every blockchain does, because the consensus in a blockchain, whether it is proof of work, whether it is proof of stake, which are not consensus, by the way, these are anti-Sybil resistant mechanisms. So I should probably speak a little about Byzantine fault tolerance systems or Nakamoto consensus. But since everybody referred to them as proof of work, proof of stake, that's why I conflate these terms. So proof of work and proof of stake are consensus that do transaction settlement. You see, all these things are already inside of a blockchain. So in synthesis, what makes Dusk different, and why Dusk? Well, because Dusk is a blockchain that has privacy and has got regulations, or we encoded regulations in the protocol. In this case, the protocol is Zedger, that is essentially the implementation of a security regulation that in Europe is called MiFID II. So when we are talking about replacing this institution or replacing that institution, that's not exactly correct. It's more like blockchain offers the same kind of functionalities that these institutions are currently performing for next to nothing. So that's why you can replace a constellation of different functionalities offered by different organizations with just one single protocol that does it all, does it even better. Does this mean that there will not be a Euroclear? That this means that there will not be banks clearing transactions? No, of course there will be, but they will evolve. Euroclear will, for instance, and by the way, Euroclear is already experimenting with DLTs, but it again is it's all private DLT, so it has not really the benefit of offloading system cost to the community, which to me makes absolutely no sense. But again, they see the great promise of blockchain and DLTs. And in fact, they want to evolve into providing services to many more customers rather than actually just fiddling with technology, which none of these institutions want to do.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked a question about that, actually. Are private blockchains a threat to Dusk? Sounds like no.
No, private blockchains are absolutely not a threat to Dusk. I think that with private blockchain, you mean permission blockchain. Like I said, when you have a permission blockchain, when you have a private blockchain, somehow this private blockchain needs to have a business model because it is not exactly a protocol. And this business model, either it is an enterprise blockchain that is created and maintained by IBM, so Corda, Ledger, Hyperledger, these kind of things. Sorry, Corda belongs to another organization, or R3, or what have you. And they charge millions, in fact, to create this thing. Dusk will simply go to any kind of MTF and say, hey, you can have it for free. In fact, actually, it might very well be that we will pay you some marketing budget if you adopt our protocol. So I think it's a little bit of an unfair battle there, And all these private ledgers, private blockchain, in fact, they also do have a lot of problems interoperating with each other. You have always the same problem. If you are essentially just using a database, whether it is a distributed database maintained by a consortium of organizations, you have a lot of problems with composability anyways. So it means that you cannot really evolve your products. So I would say that no, they are not as much as a concern for us. Also, but there are places for private blockchain, by the way. I believe, for instance, that they are probably the right technology to use in, for instance, in healthcare for pharmaceutical results and sharing of different kind of information. You do not want these things on a public ledger for extra security because in the end, you also do want certain particular sensitive information to not only be anonymized, but to be kept at with the institutions that in fact have the ownership of the data of their users. In the case of finance, that's almost never the case because you have these giant KYC factories that actually do not want to be KYC factories. It's a huge cost for them,
Yeah, that you don't need liquidity between hospitals.
Yeah, exactly. That's also.
The last question, I think, that seems to sort of fit into this because there are just some very specific questions here. In terms of real-world assets, a lot of institutions that seem to be experimenting around have been using Ethereum. Do you think that's just because it's the biggest and the most well-known, or is there something particularly good about real-world assets on Ethereum?
Well, I would say that if I want to go on a bicycle, then probably I'm going to learn on a tricycle. Why? Because the tricycle is way more convenient. It's basically there. You are probably not going to fall down. You can learn how to ride. But at some point, you outgrow the tricycle. You see that the tricycle does not have certain particular features that in fact you do need in order to go from A to B. You need a bicycle for that. And I believe that a lot of different organizations, they have an intuition of how good it is to use an interoperable layer on top of which there is a free flow of assets and liquidity. But of course, beyond an initial experimentation, then either these organizations, they are left to create their own ill-suited private blockchain to do practically the same thing and to fix these problems. And it's no better than having a database because in the end you are, again, having an infrastructure that you create yourself, that you are paying for, that you need to maintain, that doesn't really have any of the benefits of an open ledger, or Dusk.
So do you feel like a lot of institutions are just sort of waiting for something that they can actually use?
I think that there is that a lot of the institutions are awakening right now, and they are warming up to the idea of using a ledger. However, I haven't encountered. Probably I will sound a little arrogant here, but I haven't encountered a single protocol that could, in fact, explain to these people what the opportunity is. I don't think that there is a protocol out there that is, in fact, telling institutions, look, you are spending millions in a year in using functionalities that can be that can be executed on a DLT and on a smart contract platform. Do you want to try? Nobody is telling them that. Everybody is telling about RWA. Everybody is telling them about decentralization. Everybody is telling them about smart contract, all these things, and nobody gives a shit about it. Seriously.
And do you think that, are other blockchains even trying to solve these issues or even aware of these issues? Because
these are extremely problematic issues to solve. Dusk is better positioned than other protocols because we have been working on this path for 5 years without ever changing our focus. There are other blockchains that, in fact, they want to become one or the other a replacement for one or the other components in the financial landscape. But as a matter of fact, when you have a blockchain, right? So when you have a protocol and you have a lot of VCs, in fact, that invest heavily in this protocol, they want a return. And they want a return within what? 1 year, 2 years? 2 years is already quite long for a crypto VC. So what do? Well, they push basically the blockchain toward the masses, to have the adoption, to get as many users as possible, which are no users at all. They are hodlers, and then they dump on these masses. So I'm quite proud to say that there is no such a VC in Dusk. There is no such investor that is putting us pressure on running after this or that narrative in order to be appealing to the masses. This was a blessing for us and a curse, because of course, when you see,
others,
others. Was gonna say Shiba Inu, which is my favorite chain, by the way. Acquiring a market cap of millions, hundreds of millions, in fact, sometimes billions, for to exchange a couple of dog pictures, or other people that are using extremely convoluted terminology in order to say how good they are, they're cryptographers. Well, of course, because they need to create certain particular narratives. In our case, we have been somehow always at the center of some narrative, but not because we wanted to, but because we essentially saw the market going in a certain direction. If you're not a complete idiot, you could see already in 2018 that at some point regulators would knock at people's door, and now we have MiCA, and everybody is speaking about privacy, which nobody cared in 2018, and transparency or regulatory friendly environments. Of course, it was very foreseeable to see these things already. Real world asset is all the rage nowadays. Mm-hmm. We are speaking about real world assets since ages. Why? Because it's what we do. It's not that we want to be in the narrative. And same thing for what concerns DeFi. The capability of owning your asset and composing. Of course, we got inspired somehow by these narratives too, but it's not that we have been running after them.
I feel like the way that we've been talking about, say, regulated assets for a long time, that's real world assets. It's just not quite the catchphrases. That is pretty much everything that I had to ask. Just, is there anything left? Because there's one more day, I suppose, of the work week. Is there anything left on your to-do list that you can share?
Well, I have many things left on my to-do list. For instance, I want to speak a little more with my teams and to create a project that also the community can follow, and see if we are on track with Mainnet or not, with our plan or not. I think that keeping a path of full transparency is really important to us. I think there is quite a big dinner tonight, so that's also another thing that I am quite looking forward to. And of course, it has been a pleasure so far to be around my people. In fact,
Cool. I think I will wrap it up there. It doesn't look like any questions have come in. I know that a lot of people submitted questions, and we have a record of them now. This didn't quite feel like the right time for those specifics, but we have them written down.
Pick one at random.
Oh, okay.
Of the specific questions.
Okay. What kind of support is there expected to be for developers? As this question does include the masses, but what kind of support is there to be expected for developers? Let's say as Mainnet goes live. Are we going to be actively trying to support and onboard developers?
No, we are not going to actively trying to support and onboard developers at Mainnet. There was a question a couple of days ago about what kind of activities we're going to do for developers. We are not going to bribe developers to build on top of Dusk just to create the impression of being adopted or these kind of things. We are certainly going initially to focus a lot on those and the actual asset that we have, which is the node runners, the provisioners, the stakers. Those are the kind of people that I want to focus on at the very beginning, because they are going, the entirety of the security of the platform is going to be in their hands. So we are most likely going to prepare some campaign in order to tell the market that we are going on Mainnet, that there is quite very good incentives that are waiting those that will in fact onboard, especially earlier on. And I want to make it extremely simple for them to contribute to the overall network, because the success of Dusk as a network is also depending on the success of the provisioners and everybody that will support the network through their stakes. So developers are probably going to come afterwards, also because we have quite a keen focus on our business arm. But developers for us, while they are very respected, very important, I'm a developer myself, so I know, but they are not as important in other chain that depend entirely on applications done, whatever applications done on their chain in order to foster adoption. We have utility. We have a lot of utility ourselves. But I can tell you this, the developers that we are definitely going to help are those that are connected to a real organization, real world organizations that will want to offload their services on top of Dusk. And this is part of the economic protocol that we have been conceiving, that we have architected and specified, especially during these last days.
So it's not our objective to have impressive looking stats on DeFi Llama?
No, it's definitely not our goal. No.
I do like the idea of me, like as a normal person, validating transactions for banks and stuff. That makes me feel pretty good.
Well, it doesn't. I mean, also we are working a lot on making it very accessible for everyone. In fact, all our tests at the moment, they are running on incredibly cheap machines with just one core, especially the consensus. And we see that the network is performing very well there. So it's really something very good for us.
Awesome. I'm the infrastructure now.
I hope many of the community members will.
Awesome. Let's wrap it up there, I think. Thank you for joining us for Dusk TV. I hope everything worked. And we will obviously have more AMAs and spaces and stuff in the future. This was just a bit of an opportunity as as everyone was here. So thank you. Marcus, I assume, will start logging off and I'll just keep talking slightly awkwardly. Until then, thank you very much.